I always wanted to be a teacher when I started school.
We're here for the students, and we want what's best for the student.
And I love watching people learn.
Your teacher, student, academics, curriculum, whatever, that center post, the one that keeps this education together.
Hello, and welcome to the Last Best Learning Podcast, a podcast designed for Montana's educators, where our mission is to deliver digestible and relevant professional learning that honors educators' capacity in an increasingly busy world. Our state's educators empower minds, elevate futures, and inspire self-discovery, and we walk beside them. In this month's episode, hosts Katrina Engeldrum, the Math Instructional Coordinator, and Michelle McCarthy, the Science Instructional Coordinator for the Montana Office of Public Instruction, are joined by a special guest. His name is Michael Sitter, and he works at Polson School District and has for many years. And during his time there, not only has he contributed to the outcomes for his students, he has also participated heavily in the creation and then the continuation of a mentorship program. So why did we choose this special guest? Well, it's no secret that teachers nationally are leaving education in unprecedented numbers. On a presentation in 2023, the OPI's Chief Operating Officer, Julie Mergel, reported that nearly 90% of Montana schools had teacher turnover in at least one teaching position in 2022. Additionally, at the time of this original recording, there were over 800 open positions listed on OPI's Jobs for Teachers website, with many districts starting school that same week. Unsurprisingly, educator retention and recruitment is at the forefront of many minds, impacting both policy and research, and we're going to dig into these concepts today with our special guest.
So the question many are asking is, what can be done? While teacher retention is a complex problem, effective mentor programs can help in retaining teachers and build their resilience. A research articles on teachers' self-perceptions about the effectiveness of statewide mentoring programs mention studies from Ingersoll and Strong, I apologize if I didn't get that name right, which found that beginning teachers who participated in mentorship had higher satisfaction, commitment, and retention. These teachers were also better at keeping students on task, creating lesson plans, using effective discussion techniques, maintaining positive classroom environments, adjusting instruction, and managing classrooms effectively. Most of the reviewed studies suggested that when new teachers took part in mentoring programs, their students showed better academic progress.
While these types of programs are great in theory, it can sometimes be difficult to envision what they look like in application within Montana schools. And that's why we are excited to hear from Michael Sitter from Polson School District, who was involved in developing and implementing a local mentorship program in Polson, Montana.
So welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us today. Kicking us off, can you share a little bit about your school experience and essentially give us the scoop on your professional journey?
Wow. And to summarize that in a short period of time, I really didn't know what I was going to do in college. And eventually, after some extra years, I decided to be a teacher. So I was fortunate enough to get hired at the Polson School District in 2002. And at the time, I was in my early 30s, and I was actually a really young teacher at the school at that time. And what impacted me then was that they said, okay, well, here's the keys to your room. Here's the teacher's edition for the textbook. If you have any questions, here's the other teacher that teaches your subject. Ask them. And that was, for me, my introduction to how you got mentored, so to speak, which really wasn't that. That's a very traditional method in the past. And it was up to me to go to other teachers and spend a lot of my extra time just trying to find my path. And in 2007, myself and 3 other teachers went to an OPI training on how to set up a mentoring program. And over the course of that next school year in 2007, we developed a mentoring program for the Polson High School, which we implemented in 2008 for 9 new teachers that we had that year. And then we ran that program and adapted it over the course of a decade. And then in 2018, we were fortunate enough to have a superintendent who valued mentoring to the point where he thought it was an important thing to have district-wide. And I became the district mentoring coordinator in addition to being a teacher. And then we have run the program here in Polson since then.
We all tend to wear different hats when we're working in schools, huh?
Yes.
I'm wondering if you can tell us how you all realized that you needed that program in the first place.
Well, you can think of how I summarized my experience as a beginning teacher, which was really just kind of finding your way on your own. But there's been a tremendous turnover in the teachers there in the time that I have been here, to the point where we have hired and hired and hired lots of new teachers. And the feedback that we received on our mentoring program was tremendous, to the point where, I mean, that really probably one of the most rewarding parts is to have people who were in the mentoring program who just really badly wanted to be mentors and be part of it, or be on the mentoring committee, or do something that would allow them to help others in the way they felt like they got helped. So
it's great to hear that you know, the program that you all cultivated came out of experience and saying that this is not good enough, right? Like, we all as educators are supposed to look back and kind of correct and reflect on our processing, and you almost took that one step, well, not almost, you definitely took that as a step further and said, let's not just look at our classrooms, let's look at school-wide what we can do better. And I think that's great. What early challenges or obstacles popped up that needed to be addressed as you guys were developing this program and trying to work out the kinks?
Well, one of the things that we did was we felt it was very important to get as much feedback as we possibly could from mentors and from new teachers, people being mentored. And so we used a lot of that. However, the one thing that we had trouble with, well, I should say there were two things. The first one was the age-old issue in anything in the school is time, okay? Trying to find time for mentors to mentor, for new teachers to meet with mentors, to get that level of collaboration and feedback that they needed, that back and forth to learn and to grow on both parts. The second component of that, again, an age-old problem in schools is money. When we first did it, it was almost exclusively volunteer time for teachers who were mentors. They didn't do it for any sort of monetary advantage. So that is difficult because it's easy for a mentor to say, you know, I'm super busy as a teacher. I've got to help this other teacher, but there's no real skin or teeth in the game. There's no reason for me to really do it except I should. And that works for some people and it doesn't work for others. So that was a problem. And then I would say on a sub level, probably to both of those, one of the things that has kind of vexed me over time in the program is a lack of available training for mentors. Any sort of professional development, any sort of group that runs something where a mentor could go to and learn things about how to be a better mentor. Those would be probably the three biggest issues that cropped up.
So those sound really actually kind of difficult to surmount, but you guys obviously did. Could you share some success stories from the programs or tell us aspects that you're most proud of?
The thing that makes me the proudest about this program is when previous new teachers who are mentored come back and want to be involved. They really are passionate about being involved. That to me is probably the biggest success. Like, I want to do something for other people like it was done for me. The other times I just get feedback from individuals that say it was a very, like, we would give a year-end feedback form and say, what would you change? What would you do different? And most of the feedback was, it's great. We love what you're doing. I'm so glad you have it. It was so helpful. All those kind of things. I would say those were some of the largest non-empirical feedback. I wish I could say that the program kept all of the best teachers, the young teachers in the school district here in the buildings. But I can't say that. And part of that is really out of our control. Because if you're a young single individual in this town, it's not a great place for a young single individual to be. And that's something we can't really control. So we just kind of had to deal with that as a byproduct. Other successes for me would be moving it from just in the Polson High School to making it school district wide, to actually getting mentors stipends, to actually anything that formalized it in the district. I think all those things were huge steps. So
I'll just say for the audience listening, but I actually went through this program as a mentee, and one thing that I really appreciated about it was that the mentors in the program don't just view new educators as the only ones to learn. I got the sense in my experience that it was reciprocal, right? So everyone could learn from everybody else. And I'm just kind of curious, Mike, whether you can tell us how Polson fostered that collegial reciprocity, or if that just came out organically from the community.
I'd love to take credit for it. But I can't do that. It's an organic thing. In my experience, I would say that it's almost like a form of professional development for a mentor, because they get to be reminded of what it was like to be a new teacher. They get to see teaching through a fresh set of eyes, and just some of those things that ground you as a teacher and remind you of where you've been and where you've gotten to, and how and what it took to get to where you are. So those are all super rewarding, and for a lot of teachers, it ends up being it can end up being a catalyst to some upward mobility in the district, and for some people, it makes them feel like it's not maybe necessarily an upward move, but a lateral move. Like, here, I'm doing this in addition to being a teacher. Because most of our mentors, I would say, are really, really high quality teachers, and they really are good at their profession, and they really enjoy what they're doing. And part of being a mentor is passing on your passion. And I'm really proud of the mentors who were so good at doing that.
So we've talked a little bit about this already, but is there anything else that you feel sets the mentorship program apart at Polson or makes it unique to your community and your school?
Well, number one, I would say the longevity of it is definitely unique within the state. For a long time, our mentor stipends were higher than anywhere else in the state, which is, in a way, you don't want to brag about money, but what you're bragging about is the support that you have within the district for this program, how valuable it is to the district. When they created the position that I filled, which was the district mentoring coordinator, that just seemed like, man, we have a real program here. So I would say those are some successes, the longevity and the support that we received for it.
Yeah, well, I think that the funding is also a professionalism piece too. It's not just the
Exactly.
working for it. Yeah. Okay. So how were the mentors selected for the program?
It's an interesting process, and I got to try to say things without stepping on toes. We used a lot of the material that we learned from the OPI training. And when you go to select a mentor, you of course want an exemplary teacher. And so that was always the first people we sought out. And within being an exemplary teacher, you also needed to be somebody who was in the same content area, the same grade level as the teacher you're going to mentor, and also in close proximity. You didn't want to be in a different building. You didn't want to be on the other end of the building. You didn't want to be on a different floor. You had to be easily accessible. So those were all very important. If I get down to the brass tacks, then within each building, there is a mentor committee formed of teachers. Again, these are passionate teachers who want to be involved in the program, and maybe not necessarily as mentors, but they're going to shape what the program looks like in the individual buildings. But they would work they would work up a list. They'd say, okay, here's the positions we have to fill this year. We got a third grade position, we got a first grade position. And then they would say, you know, I think the good first grade mentor would be this teacher and a good third grade mentor would be this teacher. And then they would go to the administrator and say, these are the people that we would like to have apply for the mentorship. How do you feel about them? And ultimately it was the administrator's decision on who would be mentoring. I mean, the way the program is set up, anyone could apply, could submit it, could fill out, complete an application and send it into the district office. And then the administrator would select who that was ultimately. But those were kind of the behind the scenes steps that went on.
That was great. I didn't even think about proximity, so thank you.
I would say that proximity almost trumps content area sometimes. So.
Yeah, makes sense though. The other question I had is, and if you can define it a little more, you kind of touched on it. What did you observe about your colleagues that were considered effective mentors?
I did. You're right. I did touch on this a little bit, but these are exemplary teachers. These are when you think about the teachers in your building, you're like, and you said, all right, let me pick the best 5 teachers I can think of. These are the ones that come to mind. These are master teachers who've been at it for usually more than 5 years. They have a great sense of classroom management. They have a great sense of delivering content. Their kids learn. That they have very successful students in their classroom and very well-run classrooms, those would be the kind of, and again, it goes back to that passion. These are people who are passionate about what they're doing in the classroom, and those are usually the kind of people that you want to take somebody else under their wing.
I agree that it's interesting you mentioned that passion part because I think you can be a great teacher in a lot of boxes that are checked off. You can have the classroom management or you can have the content knowledge and things like that, but that passion is really what I feel takes somebody to that next level that you want them to, like you said, go and foster that in the new teachers in your building as well. What kind of feedback did you get from those mentees? I know you spoke a little bit about the positivity, but we're more kind of curious as well about how you articulated that feedback into action and helped drive the program's evolution through that.
Okay. The multiple levels of feedback. Of course, at the end of the year, we'd always have a feedback form that they would fill out. Just throughout the course of the school year, either through email or just face-to-face conversations, or a mentor coming to me or a new teacher coming to me and saying, hey, we did this. We have, like, for example, hey, you presented all this stuff at the beginning of the year, but we didn't hear anything about PLCs. Maybe we should talk about PLCs. Or, I feel like we had a great amount of time that we met. It would have been nice if we had some more time to talk about, I don't know, the STAR reading tests or something. Just all those kind of little things. When we first started doing we do a new teacher training before the school year starts. And when we very first started doing it at the high school, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 days, which is huge. We would cover all kinds of stuff in a lot of depth. And then immediately we started to get feedback. It's too much. We don't need this. We don't need that. And eventually it went from 2 days to pretty much a half a day or 1 day, and it was a little shocking to me at first, but it's what people asked for and how those things changed. One of the biggest things that was, I don't know if paradigm shifting is probably a little too severe a word, but when I went into other buildings, when I went to Cherry Valley Elementary School, or I went to Linderman Elementary School, or I went to the middle school, and I met with their mentor committees when they were first starting to set things up, and we would talk about stuff, and I'd be like, okay, this is really different from the high school. It was, I just had to, I had to learn as fast as I could when I was talking to them about how they would run things and how they would do things and how it would be different. And for me, I said, you got to have these 4 or 5 or 6 pieces, make them look like Cherry Valley, make them look like Linderman, and whatever you need to do. So it was It's been a very different experience for me to do some of that stuff as the mentoring coordinator, and those are the things that kind of evolve the program over time.
It's great to hear that there was some ownership and agency, even district-wide with all the different buildings. Did you notice, were there components that the schools kind of elected to keep standardized, or was it mostly like a completely different program every building you went into?
No, I would say there were some components that were standardized, and part of that was came from the district level, because they said, okay, we're going to pay these stipends, and we need to make sure that certain things are happening. And so part of that was that every single school had to develop a year-long mentoring checklist of these are the minimum things a mentor should do within the course of a year. So that was one component that everybody had to do. Another one was that they would all create a binder for their new teachers of just some important information so you could access that. Later, that evolved into a mentor folder, as well as some important information that mentors could access as well. Again, that goes back to the lack of training piece, just trying to find sources and information to help mentors be better mentors. And then we, of course, at the beginning of the year, new teacher training, which I would run, was district-wide. And then we'd also do what we called the Over the Hump celebration, which was in January or February. So when half of the school year was done, get everybody together and just have a good catered meal and have a good evening and do something fun and celebrate the fact that you made it through your first half year. So those were the main universal components. But really, again, reflecting again that how the elementary school's checklist looked and how their binder looked, had pieces that were similar, but had pieces that were very specific to those buildings.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I think too, you talked about how the administrators came together. It sounds like other educators in different buildings came together. Did other community leaders or other levels of involvement occur kind of organically to support this?
I'm going to say that outside of the school district, there wasn't a ton of involvement really within the program. That would be my short summary of that answer. Everything happened within the district, and I think really for the administrators, they were pretty happy to have it have one thing taken off their plate. One thing they really didn't have to worry about was some of the juggling of newer teachers. I mean, they still had to do their job as far as evaluating them, but that was not part of our program.
Yeah.
I myself was part of a mentorship program, but I was not that fortunate. Just thrown in. But on that, I know we've talked about and you've shared that there wasn't necessarily retention you would have liked to see in the district. But could you talk a little bit about maybe resilience building in the educators and the enhancement of professional growth, either the mentee or the mentor?
Okay. The resiliency piece, I think, is also a powerful component of mentoring. And the longer that we did the program, the more I understood and tried to relay to the mentors that sometimes you were going to be more of an emotional support than teaching pedagogy or something with them. And that, I think, for a lot of new teachers, is great to have somebody that is someone that they can trust to share information and share their emotions with at those times where it becomes very difficult throughout the school year, and know that it was a safe conversation. So I think that helped a lot of our new teachers battle through some difficult parts. And really, I guess one thing I should differentiate for you and your listeners is that there's two levels of mentoring within our school district. There's mentoring of what we call the BT, which is a beginning teacher. So these are teachers who this is their first job. And then there was mentoring of what we called an NT, or a new teacher, which is somebody who came from a different area, who already had teaching experience. And so the mentoring in those cases was very different. The level of mentoring that they did was very different between those two. For a new teacher, mostly what we're trying to do is just smooth out the transition so that they know where we have staff meetings, they know what bus duty is like, and so that they don't have to focus on that, and they can focus on working with their students. And with a brand new teacher, it's much more in depth. It's observations and a lot of back and forth and trying to figure out different things on how to do that. And I think for any new teacher, beginning teacher, it's just great to have somebody to turn to immediately, know that you can always go to. The other thing that I've had to do a lot of work on is learning about millennials first, and then we move past that, and now Generation Z and what they expect out of mentors and what they expect in the classroom as teachers, and try to educate the mentors and steer people towards this need for immediate feedback, this desire to use technology, and lots of instruction, those sort of things. So.
Thank you. I've never caught up with all the generation pieces. I'm awful at keeping track of that. I'm a boomer myself, puts me back. So if you could share one piece of advice for schools that are starting a mentorship program, what would that be?
My advice is whoever does the program, whoever is going to be a mentor or head up the program or whatever that is, you want to recruit passionate people. You want to recruit people who either know what it's like to be mentored or know what it's like to not be mentored, and want to make sure that if they weren't mentored, that there is mentoring. If they were mentored, that they know what to do, and that they, I guess, like when you see a passionate teacher in the classroom, you can see what it looks like. And how it reflects in their teaching and their actions and their interactions with the kids, and how the students report on the class, and how parents report back from their students on the class. And you want the same thing with people who are involved in helping new teachers. You want them to be intrinsically motivated to help those teachers succeed. That would be my one piece of advice, is make sure there are passionate people involved. Not just, we're going to have a mentoring program, I think you should do it. So that's not how I would do that.
That's great advice. As educators, we value reflecting and improving on our process. So if you could go back and redo one aspect of your program, what would you improve on?
I'm going to be honest with you. When I read this question, I didn't come up with one. So I'm going to give you all of the ones that I came up with.
Great.
My first piece of advice when reflecting on it is to make sure that you do some sort of yearly update for the administrators and the school board on what's going on in the mentoring program. I can tell you through the years of running the mentoring program that if you don't do that, that your administrators and your school board have an idea in their head when they hear the word mentoring of what's going on, but they don't know what it looks like. So I would definitely make sure to update them on what's been going on in the school year, in the program, annually. If you do a district-wide program and you have a district mentoring coordinator, I needed to spend a lot more time in the other buildings in the first 2 years, meeting with them, talking through things, hashing out ideas, making sure the rudder was pointed in the right direction, and that they didn't reinvent the wheel, so to speak. That would have been extremely valuable. I think a third thing is to do a really good job of detailing the parts and the properties with the individual building administrators of the program. Again, so they know what's happening inside their buildings, the number of administrators that had no idea there was a mentoring committee in their building was a little bit startling to me. I thought that would be something that they would know, but that's just an example. And then the last thing is find a way, a source, or some way to do it in-house, but to find a way to build in training for mentors. I think that it does two things. It makes them be better mentors. It adds legitimacy to what you're doing because they say, okay, this is how I should be doing it. I have an idea, just like administrators have an idea that what mentoring looks like. Teachers have an idea what mentoring looks like, but then when you give them framework or you give them methodology, then they go, oh, okay, well, I was doing parts of it, but not all of it. And so those are the four things I would say. Update the admin, make sure that you're in those buildings district-wide, make sure that your administrators know what the heck is going on in their building. And the last one is to make sure that you build in training for those mentors. So 4, not 1, sorry.
No, it's good. I think you basically summarized everything, that you just handed all the listeners a little neat package of what they should do and how they should proceed. So it's great. If you can impart one last, critical element or something to leave the audience with about peer mentorship, what would that be?
I would say the biggest thing about mentoring, whether you are the district mentor coordinator, the mentor committee, an administrator, a mentor, or a new teacher, it all boils down to communication. And you have to have open lines of communication. You have to have trust in that communication. And you have to be able to relay information in a timely fashion. So I guess if I had to pick one thing, it would be communication. One more thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes total sense. It was, you could hear the communication pieces in everything you've said. So I just want to thank you for sharing your experience with us, Mike. We know there's no quick fix for building resilience or retaining educators, but both the research and your experience shows that it's definitely worth the effort to make it part of schools.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
It's really important that the catchphrase in our district is mentoring is the catalyst to excellent teaching.
All right, so we've said goodbye to our guest, Michael Sitter, who joined us from Polson School District and shared about his experience with developing a mentorship program at his school. And we wanted to give you a little bit of insight of what you can expect on our next episode of the Last Best Learning podcast. We hope that you'll join us as we explore educator retention even further by looking at some statewide programs that work to pair educators across the state. Our quote that we are centering that next episode around is, I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. That's from Brene Brown. And I think it hits on some of the concepts that Mike was talking about very beautifully. So as we close and reflect upon this quote and the insights that Mike shared with us today, we challenge our listeners to consider what's one step that you can take to help a fellow educator feel seen, heard, and valued in your building tomorrow.
I'm kind of touched by our quote, and it ties into the last couple of podcasts that we've done, that it's all one big piece. Just a reminder on how to leverage these for these podcasts for professional development. Attached will be both the independent and the collaborative listener guides, and they highlight 2 directions you can go to get professional development units. And if you would like to recommend topics for future episodes, which we would really encourage you to do, to please fill out the Qualtrics form, also linked in the bio and in the listener guides as well. So,
and I'll just add, Michelle, I know we have a lot of topics that we want to cover based off the data we're getting, but if you are an expert in something, or you have something like what Mike had and you want to share with the field, we are also open to that. So feel free to reach out to us in that Qualtrics forum and find a way to participate in this conversation and in this space.
So that's a great point. I'm sitting here going, yeah, I wish I would have thought of that.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Last Best Learning podcast. And again, we're your hosts, Katrina and Michelle, and we're just thankful that you're embarking on this journey with us.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.